tensions are high. A young kid is going in a room to take a test, but he's nervous because it's the SAT. And what happens is he's trying to calm down. The teacher tells him, well, it's okay, you just take deep breaths and you'll be fine. Take 6 deep breaths. So the kid is like, he does it to the point where he becomes lightheaded. That's not cool. That's very, very not healthy. And what happens is, after that, the kid begins to feel a lot more anxious than he did before. And he doesn't understand why. I think it's in general a not very practical way, and I think it's kind of a disgusting way to preach something that you don't practice. And remember how many times did you hear this phrase? It was like, don't lean back in your chair or else you'll break your head open and crack your skull open and then you'll die. Like, tell me one person who you've heard or seen anywhere who actually fell back from his chair, broke his skull open and died. Like, it's a fairy tale. And people just say it so confidently. You know, there's a good book. I'm getting a little off topic, but Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules for Life. I think it's Rule 9. It says don't bother children while they're skateboarding. It's a very good book. Now, I'll go into it deeper later, but very good book. And the rule is golden. And you know why? Because children have to have a little bit of scrapes on their own, and they're not gonna crack their skulls open. I can promise you that. So, oxygen advantage part 2. Now, this part is where we dive into the more practical and athletic-based exercises of this book. So we have the way you can train and improve your body use, because in the previous section we learned what the oxygen advantage was. Now we know how to apply it, and we'll learn how to apply it. So to begin, we have something that Patric calls the light breathing exercise. And what this exercise does is it in fact helps you to open up your blood vessels. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna sit up straight. Obviously, you should always be sitting up straight. Check your posture right now. And after you sit up straight, you'll put one hand on your chest. You'll put the other hand on your stomach. And you will basically apply a little bit of pressure. A little bit of pressure, not too much, not too little. And then you're gonna inhale. Notice how it's harder to inhale. The reason is because you're obviously applying pressure and making it a little bit more difficult to breathe. We'll go over how water also does a similar effect on your body. And what happens is here, if you do this 3 to 5 minutes and you do this exercise, you will basically improve your ability to breathe better. Take a breath. And then later, after you've taken that breath, the next breath you take, make it just a little bit shorter. Just a little bit shorter. So you go maybe... And then after this, you'll go... So it's just a teeny bit shorter, but what's gonna happen is it's gonna train you, progressive overload. It's gonna basically overload your ability to breathe a little bit more, so then you'll come out stronger in the end. And hopefully you followed along, and what happened is, you've just opened up your blood vessels. So the key, what happens is your breath basically looks something like this. If it was a chart, a graph, your breath would be going high, low, high, low. So that's not how it's supposed to be. The way it's supposed to be is it's supposed to be going high, low, high, low, high, low, high, low. So it's not a massive amount of oxygen you take in, but rather it's more small, and instead of having a ton of oxygen come in your body and leave your body, it's reduced, and preferably it's not as close together as I've shown in this example, so a little bit farther apart. Remember, the Bolt score, something we've talked about in the previous video. You have to keep a little bit of that carbon dioxygen inside your body in order for you to oxygenate better. Nostrils. If you have bigger nostrils, then it's much better You know why? Because you're lucky. You're genetically gifted. And what happens is, the bigger your nostrils obviously are, the more air you can absorb. And that's good for various reasons, because what you can do is you don't have to breathe through your mouth now, so you don't have to... It will honestly, if you have bigger nostrils, you'll be less tempted to breathe through your mouth, unless it's clogged. Because if you master this system, you'll be having a lot of oxygen going in your nose without needing to use your mouth, because your nostrils are bigger. For exercise, the first 2 weeks of nose breathing, Patrick says your results will go down, but then they will skyrocket. And myself, I've tried that, and I wouldn't say my results skyrocketed, but they definitely improved. Breathing became a lot easier. It became more natural. You know, when you do something and it just, after a while, you're like, why? Why did I never do this? It's like, that's how it's always supposed to be. Now let's talk about before and after your exercises. So if you go to the gym, if you do any sort of exercise, Patrick recommends us a good startup and warm-up routine. Now, they're not your big warm-up and startup routines. It's very small, so you have no excuses to not do this. First, your startup routine. And what he says is when you walk, so take a little walk. If you're everybody I've seen who goes to the gym, and if it's a new gym, you're like, whoa, I don't know any equipment here, so let me just go on the treadmill. And so when you go on that treadmill, as you're walking and observing the gym for your next equipment that you're going to conquer, what you should do is you should walk 10 to 30 paces. And you should take a breath every 10 to 30 paces or steps. So you'd basically go walk, I don't know, 10, how much? Let's say 15 steps, and then take another breath. Then walk another 15. And you should do that for 10 repetitions. After you've done that, your body will be properly oxygenated in order to take your workout to the next level without any fitness coaches. So then you have the cool downs, and what the cool downs, and I'm guilty of this myself, I usually don't execute the last, let's say, like post-workout stretching. But I know a lot of you guys don't do too, but it's fine. So what happens is you have to cool down, and the cool down here is a little bit easier. So what you'll do is you'll simply hold your breath for 2 to 5 seconds. That's it. Just and then you can inhale. And after you do this, recommends about, I don't know, 5 to 10 repetitions. Again, it depends on how exhausted are you and how much time in a hurry you are. I know you're all in a hurry, yeah. We're all busy people, but at least 5 of those. And then afterwards, it will get you back into the proper circulation mode post-workout. And afterwards, we have something known as the high altitude training. So people who live in higher altitudes, once again, I had a friend, he recently went out to New Mexico and he climbed those mountains at 6,000 feet elevation, or 6,000 foot elevation. And so what happened is, he came back and he says, man, I feel great. Like, I actually feel at the top of my game. Because the thing is, once again, the oxygen concentration is a little bit lower up in the mountains. It's a little harder to breathe. But the thing is, the reason athletes don't train in the mountains a lot and don't live there is because the limited oxygen that you receive limits your ability to perform to a certain level. So what happens is you're not able to perform as much as you could if you were down where there's plenty of oxygen. So it results in muscle deterioration. And that's not good because we want to keep our muscle mass. And what happens is you can basically, the solution for this is to live high and train low. So you would be living at a high altitude, preferably in the mountains, and then you would basically train lower on the ground. But I know a lot of us don't live in the mountains, so what you could do is replace this once again with the exercise for breathing I've shown you earlier, the putting your hand on the chest and stomach. And you can also practice cardio, because cardio allows you to have your oxygen circulate better. Endurance exercise, cardio, so long distance, jogging, running, walking, or cycling, or any of those, even swimming. We have something then that Patrick dives into. It's really interesting. It's called the spleen. So it's a part of your body, and he has a study where he read a study that was conducted. And it was people who had spleens and didn't have spleens. The reason the people didn't have spleens was because they got snipped away out of their body. And the reason I'm not a big advocate in the first place of snipping away your organs is because every organ in your body has a function. That should be common sense. And when you go to delete your appendixes, it's still kind of iffy whether it's just a useless, like who, again, point from the intro. Why would you just consider having some organ and saying, we don't need these? Like, what the hell is this bullshit mindset? No, if you were made with this organ, then it served a purpose for your evolution. So once again, I won't talk about and get into that all in this video. So let's talk about the spleens once again. So what happened is your spleen, it turned out that it did have a function. Holy cow. So what your spleen did is it basically allowed you to intake oxygen, and it contracted. And when it contracted, it released additional red blood cells, and these blood cells went into your circulation, and so later this obviously improved your oxygen carrying capacity. Pretty cool. And the people with the spleens basically outran the people without spleens. Long story short. Then we have the spleen activation, which happens usually at a level of high altitude. And again, high altitude training can help with this. So Patrick says this can be achieved at sea level by reducing available oxygen, following the exercise I've shown you, or doing endurance exercises, and increases your turn of hemoglobin, which increases something that you guys should know. What does hemoglobin increase? It was in the previous video. It increases your oxygen absorption in the blood, which is what we want. Basically, holding a breath, performing a breath hold after taking an exhalation reduces your oxygen saturation in the blood, which simulates the high altitude training. Now, there's a secret that Patrick teaches us, and the secret is in baking soda, the stuff that helps your cookies puff up in the oven. I don't know why I'm having cooking references, but it helps your food basically puff up and make it more puffy. But what it does to you is it actually decreases the lactic acid in your muscles. And for those of you that are not aware, what lactic acid is let's say you go to the gym and you are trying to get your New Year's resolution that you'll probably not achieve unless you read a book and actually make a plan and follow that plan. But let's say you start going to the gym and your biceps are able to pick up a weight of or curl a weight of, let's say, 15 pounds. So you take your 15-pound weights, you start curling your weights, and you're thinking you're a baller. But in reality, after about, let's say, 8 sets? You guys are stronger there. After 15 sets, your muscles start to feel like you're like, ooh, and your weight, you can't go any further up. What happens is your muscle, so your bicep, it gets filled up with lactic acid. So what happens is, well, Jeff Cavalier, he makes these body demonstrations. So you have your bicep, and when you curl, it basically fills up after a certain amount of reps. The ETP, the energy, some kind of energy in your biceps get used up, and it gets filled up with lactic acid. And this lactic acid prevents you from using it. So it kind of gets covered, and it's like a milky acid. And what happens with baking soda, which I did not know, which is really interesting, it's like a sort of a legal steroid. So apparently if you take baking soda, and the way he recommends to take it is you take, traditionally he says you take half a tablespoon of baking soda and half a spoon of alcohol. But I don't drink because it's self-explanatory. There's nothing to explain. 50 Cent, Curtis Jackson, I'll make a reference. He has an amazing philosophy on this. He says he usually doesn't drink, or did not drink when he was younger, and doesn't smoke either, because it clouds your brain and it doesn't allow you to perform at your peak ability. And I think that's kind of stupid, because why would you not want to perform at your peak ability? Why would you just block yourself and stop yourself from performing and executing functions at the top level? I think that's just stupid. So once again, I got off topic again. He says to do that, but for me, I just I don't do it on a daily basis, but if I do, he recommends I tried it. So I took half a tablespoon of baking soda and I put some water and I ate it. And my face was kind of like, after that. It was not good. It improves endurance, he says, if you eat a little bit of baking soda. It improves endurance. Now, I'm not saying you should go, chug bait, you'll die if you eat enough of it. But obviously, he says it improves your endurance, it increases breath hold ability, reduces asthma, and it also you have a higher power output. So, I don't know, I didn't really notice the power output. I'm still hitting maybe it did have a power output, because if you breathe better, you're obviously able to deliver more energy out of yourself. So, give it a try if you want. Now, Patrick mentioned something very interesting. He says that proper oxygenation is the key to being more mindful. He quotes a study. I think there's a whole book written about it. But humans, at this day and age, July 2023, have an attention span of a goldfish. Now, that's embarrassing. That is embarrassing for you and for me. For all of us. Think about it. 9 seconds is the attention span that we have. We're only able to focus on a specific thing for 9 seconds. 9 seconds. Think about it. Back in 100 years ago, before these smartphones were invented, before computers, before beats, the music, before you would go on these endless scrolls on Instagram and YouTube and shorts and everything, and you would just scroll every second, more dopamine, more excitement, more cell excitability, everything. Your brain is just, it's crazy. So he tells us to breathe better, and it will make us be more mindful. And meditation, I think a few people talk about it, how whenever they start meditating, they want to get everybody on meditation. I definitely can see why, because I've been meditating myself for about 6 months. I would say 6 months. And every single day, even if you do it for 10 minutes, it's like a refresher. It's part of it becomes second nature. And you, in general, just have a different view. Your brain shifts a little bit to where you basically, it's subconscious. It's not a dramatic shift. You don't float, okay? That's some bullshit. But you do become a little bit more relaxed and a little bit more present, a little more mindful. And whenever any meditation app you get, even on YouTube, what is the first thing they tell you to focus on when you meditate? It's your breath. It's your breath. They tell you, focus on your breath. Now, some of them are, again, this book would contradict about 50% of those people who tell you to, honestly, I don't know. I haven't heard any meditation experts to tell you to breathe through your mouth. They usually say take deep breaths. But breath and breath work is the key even to meditating. Now, Patrick mentions he doesn't go, I don't know if he still does, but he used to have these blocks of noble meditation, he called it. And what he would do is he would meditate for 10 hours. Think about it. Even the crows are excited. They're like, what? How could you meditate for 10 hours? I myself am not even gonna bullshit anybody. I can maybe meditate, if I really wanted to, for an hour. Because after an hour passes, I would have used up my willpower. Now, this is relating to another book. It's called Deep Work. I will do a review incredibly soon on that book. Super useful book. But basically, what Patrick does is it relates, I think it's either the monastic philosophy of deep work, but it's basically where you isolate for a good amount of time and you breathe, or he focused in this case on meditation, and it clears up his mind. Now, also, for me personally, I think for a lot of people, if they meditate for more than an hour, they would, one, either fall asleep, or two, they would just get too anxious about not being able to do stuff, or they would get too distracted. They would say like, okay, I gotta go eat, I gotta go drink, I gotta go use the bathroom or something. So I don't know how he does it, but it's very interesting. What he talks about is also losing weight. Obviously, you're not gonna lose 50 pounds overnight if you breathe correctly, but a lot of the, what would you say it, testimonials that are in this book, he gives of people who were coming to his practice with horrible posture, obesity, even diabetes in a few cases, and he was able to correct to a very good extent all of those diseases to help a person just through breath work. So he helped them simply by putting them on a correct breathing routine. He would give them a bolt test, and he would do all the stuff I showed you guys earlier. Very interesting. Very interesting. So this also stems from your breath. And what he says is, when you breathe correctly, the science behind it, if you guys want to know the science. So when you breathe correctly, your cells become less excitable. The excitability of your cells is reduced. So what happens is, you don't want to eat as much. So you don't eat as much, you obviously don't gain as much calories. And when you don't gain as much calories, you don't gain more weight. Now, likewise, towards the end of the book, Patric is talking about what happens when you actually begin to breathe better. So you begin to taste food a lot better. And if I had an apple right now, I would probably take a bite. And a lot of times when you eat your food, it's like, you know when you're sick and your nose is clogged and you're eating your food but it has no flavor. It's kind of similar. When you're not breathing properly, you're sick in a way. So it helps you open up when you breathe properly. Then he gives a test for the scientific people. Once again, there's a test conducted. They had a mole rat, and a mole rat is the longest living rodent, one of the longest living rodents that's ever been found, and to the current age. So in the modern day, it's one of the longest living rodents. And the reason for this, well, it's a supposed reason by Patric, is because the breath rate of a mole rat is one of the slowest found in rodents. Now, how interesting is that? It's able to live until 28 years old. A rat, a rodent. In the caveman ages, we weren't able to live to that age. Now, a rat, simply by having the lowest breathing rate out of all creatures, or rodents in this case, out-competed all of its fellow rodents. Now also, breathing slower is enabling you to produce less free radicals. And they're the fatigue-causing elements which basically make your muscles not work as long. So when you breathe properly, the reduction of free radicals allows your muscles to work longer. Now, heart health. Patric mentions, once again, if you have a weak heart, you should pay attention. Myself included. Not that I have a weak heart, but that I should pay attention. I don't know if I have a weak heart, hopefully not, but hopefully we all don't have weak hearts. But in case we do, oxygenation can help. So what we can do is basically, he gives us this little study. You can do the exercise we've shown, but as a study he conducted with a lot of his, not even students, his participants of his lectures, he would say, find your pulse, hold your pulse, and then take 6 deep breaths. What I said in the beginning of the video, how your teachers are telling you to inhale to stay calm. So if you find your pulse, you hold your pulse, and then you inhale, a lot of deep breaths, these bugs are everywhere, and you inhale, excuse me, so you inhale, and then what happens is, your heart rate goes up. Now, that's not healthy. The slower your heart beats, the more in shape you are. That's what the cardiologists say. Now, he says if you hold your pulse, and then you also breathe slower, and more calm, then your heart rate stays the same. You can see it firsthand, how breathing big and loud through your mouth is deteriorating your heart health, and not just your heart health. Then we have once again, I've touched on this a little earlier, it's the production of nitric acid. Nitric acid is produced in your nose. The way to better produce it is to eat certain foods that Patric recommends, and I'll go in a second, but nitric acid is another thing that helps your heart health. So, I think we mentioned like humming. It was like, if you hum, it releases a little bit more nitric acid, but also what can increase the production is, he mentions it's beetroot juice, it's fish, greens. You know what, he says wine. No, I say no wine, because that will get you in your freaking alcoholing habits again. That's not gonna work. No wine, beetroot juice, fish, greens, pomegranate, and oatmeal. Yes, we'll have pomegranate instead of wine. No wine. God damn. So, hope I'm not making any of your alcoholism addictions come back. But, so, we have these foods that help you produce more nitric acid, and in addition, he says people prone to heart attacks breathe 2 or 3 times more than healthier people. So if you want to reduce your chance of having a heart attack, you simply breathe less, and you reduce your breathing, and you fix your breathing, because you're not reducing it. Well, you are reducing it, but you're getting it to the optimal breathing level that it's supposed to be. Because once again, as you might remember, we're over breathing all the time. Now remember, how do you properly breathe? You properly breathe not through your upper chest, through your stomach. Let's do it together. I want to make sure you have this because I care about your health, unlike your fat doctor. Let's do it. Feel your stomach. Now, what's interesting is if you're in the EMT Fire Academy like me, you would basically be learned this interesting skill. That's called CPR. Any general person should know it. Think about it. Let's imagine a scenario. You're walking through the mall, and if you're a man, you see a beautiful in this century, I was gonna say if you're a man, you see a hot woman. If you're a woman, you see a handsome man, and you give him CPR. In this case, listen, 21st century, if you see an attractive person, and then you're prone to helping them, you want to give them CPR and save their life, well, if you over CPR them and you're cranking that chest compressions, 30 compressions over 2 breaths, you're gonna do them too often, and if you do them too often, you will over-oxygenate and the person actually will die. Now that's crazy. Think about it. I know you could die from a lack of oxygen. Now here, you can basically die from having too much oxygen. That's crazy. Well, it makes sense if, you need a balance. There was a kid who, he drank a ton of, 3 gallons of water after soccer practice and then he died. You need balance. But you can die from an over-oxygenation, but that's really rare. It's only if you over-CPR or if you take too many breaths. But you'll probably pass out before you are able to fully die. So, let's talk about asthma. Asthma is very prevalent, especially in our generation. And common sense, if you're more prone to overbreathing, if you have a potential heart attack, then you're obviously going to be more prone to overbreathing if you've got asthma. Follow the breath exercises, and I think Patric mentions this in one of his interviews, or one of his clinical practices, as you would like to say. He mentions that a client came in, and that client, he basically was suffering from asthma. He was overbreathing, so what Patric did, he got him down to reduce his BOLT score, which we've talked about in the previous lesson. He did all those exercises I've shown you guys, And once he was more or less balanced, the patient with the asthma got in the pool and he started swimming. Now, Patric says exercising in water naturally causes you to restrict your breathing volume, and because it gently compresses you. Once again, the exercise I showed you in the beginning, where you put one hand over your chest, one hand over your stomach. You apply slight pressure. Water does the same thing. So if you have access to a beach or your local YMCA, you can go ahead and swim in their pool. Or if you have a pool and you can swim in water, that will help you get your breathing back to normal. Again, for asthma exercises, I will give a shout out to Patric. He gives an email. It's patric@oxygenadvantage.com. If you have any questions, he will teach you the specific exercises for asthma. So I'm not taking all the credit. I will see you, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get out of here.